I'll call the Tuesday, April 12th, 2022 special meeting. Excuse me.
Turn on your mic, Dave.
Okay. Certainly can. Better? Okay. Okay. I'll call the Tuesday, April 12th, 2022 special meeting of the Cumberland Planning Board to order. Roll call. Ms. Brashich.
Here.
Mr. Butler.
Here.
Mr. Scommon.
Here.
Mr. Bush. Here. Ms. Reese. Here. Mr. Costa.
Here.
The chair is present. Absent are Mr. Ambrosia and Mr. McDonald. Okay. The only item on the agenda this evening is a pre-application meeting, major land development, comprehensive permit, project name, The Sanctuary, owner, St. Patrick's Church Corp., applicant, One Neighborhood Builders, location 295 Broad Street, assessors plat for lot 266 and assessors plat 305 Broad Street, and assessors plat for lot 264. The applicant is proposing to adaptively reuse the St. Patrick Church and construct new townhome style units into 42 affordable apartments. They are proposing 21 units within the existing church, 12 units where the existing rectory building is located, and 9 newly constructed townhome style units along Broad Street. And before we begin, I'd like to recognize that there are members of the Conservation Commission here. Mr. Gettinger, I don't know if there's anyone else from Conservation. Okay, Susan, anyone else? Oh, hey, Lindsay. Good, thank you very much. Mr. Modica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you. So this is solely an informational meeting. The planning board will not be voting on the application or the plans. So instead, this is just an opportunity for the applicant to present an overview of the project and for the planning board and the public to ask questions and provide feedback for the applicant when they come back with their master plan application. So at master plan, the applicant will provide a traffic study and a fiscal impact analysis that will assess the impact of any new students on the school system. And prior to the master plan hearing, the hearing will be publicly advertised and notice will be sent to all abutters within 200 feet of the project. The applicant will go into greater detail about the project, so I'm just going to give a quick overview. It comprises 2 properties that total about 1.7 acres. It's in a commercial C1 zone. The church was built in 1937. It's not in a local historic district, but it's certainly a Broad Street landmark. Property includes a rectory built in the 1970s, a garage, and a storage building. Except for the church, all of the buildings are going to be torn down. 42 rental units are proposed, 21 rental apartments are proposed in the church. A new building on the site of the rectory will have 12 apartments, and 9 duplex apartments will be built in townhouses proposed along Broad Street. And all of the rental units will be affordable. So what does affordable mean? It's housing that's deed restricted for a certain period of time, generally 30 years or more. And it's where the household pays no more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. And the tenant's eligibility is based on area median income, or AMI. So the AMI, the income, is put out every year by HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So to qualify for housing to be affordable, it has to be affordable to individuals or households earning no more than 80% of AMI. So with this project, they're proposing 60% or less. So what that means specifically in terms of income for one person would be making $36,000 a year or less. For 2-person household, it's $42,000 a year or less. 3-person is $47,000, and for 4 people, it would be $52,000 or less. So who are these people? They're just people. They drive a school bus, they're waiters and cooks at local restaurants, and they work at town hall. And they're people looking to spend not more than half their salary. They don't want to spend a ton of their salary on rent. In terms of the statewide goal, the state has set a goal for every municipality to have 10% of its housing stock be affordable. Cumberland is around 6%, so we're pretty low. And this project will help us get closer to the 10% we need. And it will help working class people that we need to help. Now I talk a bit about planning board review for this project, so it's different than what normally occurs for land development projects. So this project is coming in what's called a comprehensive permit. It's been many years since the planning board has reviewed a comprehensive permit application. So basically what it is, a comprehensive permit, it's any project that proposes more than 25% or more of affordable housing. So this project is 100%. So essentially what this means is that the entire review process is heard before the planning board. There will be no meetings before the Conservation Commission, before the Zoning Board of Review, or the Town Council. So for example, zoning variances, the planning board normally makes recommendations to the Zoning Board of Review, and it's that body that makes the decision. In this particular case, the planning board can't grant variances, but for a comprehensive permit, the planning board will be making decisions on whether to allow certain variances from zoning. So for example, in parking, our zoning requires 2 spaces per unit. With 42 proposed units, 84 spaces would be needed, but 69 are proposed. So while the planning board is not going to be granting a variance for parking relief, the planning board will be making a decision on the final number of parking spaces that will be allowed for the project. And since we're on parking, something to keep in mind is that the 27 dedicated spots at the rear of the property near the railroad will be shared with the adjacent BV Prep elementary school. Another variance for the project will be density. So for the 72,000 square foot property, our zoning ordinance only allows 14 units. So the applicant is seeking 42. Again, the planning board can't grant relief from the density, but will be making a decision on the number of units that will be allowed. The property is also zoned commercial, which means there needs to be a commercial component. So normally a rezone request would go to town council, but planning board can't rezone a property, but for this comprehensive permit, the planning board will decide if the property should be exclusively residential. And any requested relief by the applicant will be identified at the master plan and will be more fully explained in the staff report. So in addition to the planning board's review of the site plan, building density, and parking, planning board also needs to consider building height, size, materials, landscaping, and drainage. And what's important to remember for a comprehensive permit is the planning board will need to weigh any decisions on deviations from the zoning ordinance and weigh that against the town's need to create affordable housing. Quickly into traffic. Again, as I mentioned at master plan, there will be a traffic study to review. And reviewing the traffic study, something to keep in mind and to consider is that the CVS property across from the church is 1.25 acres. The church property is about 1.7 acres. So it's about a third larger. So there is potential for a by right commercial development to have a more intense use of the site with or without the church. And these commercial uses could significantly have more traffic impacts than what is being proposed. So overall, the planning department believes this is a very important project for 2 reasons. It adaptively reuses this historic church, which has been vacant for several years, and there's been a lot of uncertainty of whether the church could be or would be saved. And it brings the town much needed affordable housing. We haven't created affordable housing in many years, and we have a long way to go to get to 10%. And this project is going to help us get closer to that goal. Take any questions.
Board have any questions for Mr. Modica? Thank you, Mr. Modica.
Thank you.
Before we continue, I want to note that Mr. D'Ambrosio had entered the chambers at 6:08 p.m. And also that this meeting is also being held virtually on the Zoom platform. So anybody who is attending the meeting on the Zoom platform, if you have an interest in any item on the agenda, we will turn on your audio and promote you to a panelist as the item is called. If you would like to comment, ask a question, please raise your hand by clicking on the button labeled Raise Hand when the chairman opens the floor for public comment. Since this is sort of a departure from the way the planning board operates, what we're going to do at this point is, of course, the applicant's going to make his presentation, and then the board can ask any questions that they may have for the applicant. And then at that point, after that, I will open up questions to the floor.
I have a quick question.
Mr. Costa?
Mr. Monaco, if we're at 6% now at affordable housing, what do you think this could possibly bring us up to, this project? Possibly.
A few tenths. Yeah, I think, I don't know the exact numbers. I think we're short about 600 units total.
Wow. Okay, thanks.
So it'll be a bit, but we have to go up instead of down.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Chair, members of the planning board, my name is Ken McGonigal, and I'm the attorney for Oneyville Housing Corporation, which does business as One Neighborhood Builders. So to save some time, I'll just call them One. I'll also try to save some of your time because Glenn did an amazing job there. Particularly, there's a whole bunch of things that we appreciate. The fact that you're here at a special meeting, the fact that he discussed affordable housing in a way we hope that you will think about it, because that's the way we do. It's people that work in the town, for the town, around the town. The income level is really surprising sometimes when we go to planning boards because it's higher than many people would think. So I'm jumping because Glenn did such a good job that he just took away a lot of my thunder. But I will say that of the 42 units, I think it's important to know that 12 of the units will be reserved for older adults, allowing for aging in place. Another thing that's interesting and important for us tonight is, especially since we gather that you have not done this in a while, we do in different cities and towns, comprehensive permits. So we're with you guys for the next 6 or 8 months. So it's nice to meet you all. And we have, of course, our way of looking at things. We have a great team of experts that I'm going to tell you a little bit about. They won't all be talking tonight, but master plan, as you know, is our big show. And we have a great team that works together to present to you guys, but many of the projects that One has done, have been improved by the planning boards. So we really hope that this is the beginning of a wonderful relationship. So One is a Rhode Island corporation. It's totally nonprofit, and it has been doing this kind of work for 30 years. Not only can it get it done, but it will also manage after. They will not be going away, and any town has to worry about the management after it's built. So it'll be the people that you hear meet from One. I'm going to leave the details to the experts, but I want to tell you about the team. The first person you'll hear from is Milton Baxter, Esquire. He's the director of real estate for One, and he is the general counsel. He's going to talk a little bit about One's history, its capacities, which you need to know. Michael Abbott and Jan Michael Barabald are from our architects, Newport Collaborative Architects. They're going to show you and walk you through the current plan and listen to the questions. Not here tonight, but over the next few months, you'll know and meet Jen Hawkins. She's our executive director, the boss. We have Tim Bean and Steve Andrus from Commonwealth Engineers and Consulting. Tim is actually here tonight, but he won't be presenting until master plan. Ashley Sweet is our planner because we have to provide you documentation to show how our proposal fits within your affordable housing plan and comp plan. Chris Mason is our fiscal consultant. We'll have a report from him for you. And very importantly, based on what we've heard, and I know the street, our traffic engineer is Jim Cronin from Crossman Engineering. So on behalf of our team, I wanted to thank Jonathan, Glenn, your legal counsel, Kelly Salvatore. They've been really helpful to us already, and we know that we need to turn to them a lot in the future. So I'm going to ask Milton to come up to talk to you about one. After that, we'll go right into the architectural presentation and your questions. And then I have a little bit of a follow-up at the end when you're done, just to talk about our steps in the next few months. So thank you, Mr. Baxter.
Thank you, Ken. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Milton Baxter. I am the Director of Real Estate and General Counsel for One Neighborhood Builders. As Ken mentioned, we are a CDC, a Community Development Corporation that develops, among other things, we develop affordable housing, typically 100% affordable housing. So we were formed in 1988 as Onlyville Housing Corporation. In 2015, we merged with Elmwood Affordable Housing Corporation and became One Neighborhood Builders. We have developed 13 or 14, I think it's 14 now, affordable housing, low-income housing tax credit projects, which are similar in deal structure to this project. Our projects are different than the structure in that we haven't done an adaptive reuse project of a church before, but we're excited to do this project. We're excited to come to Cumberland. Most of our projects are in the Greater Providence area. We have a couple of projects on the board in Central Falls. We have this project before you this evening, and we're also looking at a number of other projects in East Providence as well. So we're expanding our footprint. As you well know, that the need for affordable housing is reached a crisis point, as some people call it. I don't think it's anything new. I just think there's new focus on it. And so that need and the realization of the need has created a lot of attention on affordable housing. And we are glad to be stepping into the role of being able to develop affordable housing. Why Cumberland, right? So I'm not sure the timing, but not that long ago, we were approached by the town of Cumberland, and they had identified St. Patrick's Church as a site that might be feasible for housing. And they were concerned, as most people in the town were, that the property could be sold to a commercial developer, Walgreens, or some other retailer who likes signalized corner lots, and they would raise the church and put in sort of this nondescript retail establishment there. So they identified St. Patrick's as a project that they wanted to preserve, and they had heard about our work through various sources, and they approached us and they said, would you look at this as a possible feasible, see if it's feasible for housing? So we did undertake that process. We hired Michael Abbott as our architect, and he has created the design that you're going to see tonight. We're excited that we're going to be able to produce 42 units of housing in this particular development. And we're very excited to be able to bring this project to you this evening. I'm not going to take up much more of your time because between what Glenn said and what Ken reiterated, you have a picture of who we are and what we do. But I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this early stage of our presentation this evening.
Does anyone on the board have any questions at this point? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Michael Abbott with Newport Collaborative Architects. Thank you for hearing our story tonight, and we're going to try to walk you through how we got to where we're at, and hopefully it'll make as much sense to you as it makes to us. So we came and looked at the church. Well, let me back up. Newport Collaborative has been in business for 41 years. We're historic restoration specialists. One of the projects you probably would be familiar with is we did Ashton Mill, where we took a really derelict building and turned that into a couple hundred units, which I'm very proud of because it's now become part of the Blackstone Valley National Park. So I think that that's really a real accomplishment for Cumberland to have something as part of their history to be saved and part of a new national park. So I'm very proud of that project, but we also do lots of projects all over the state, most of them with a historic bent, because that's kind of our background and what we do is historic preservation. And I have already done a church conversion. We converted the St. Bernard's Catholic Church in Wickford into affordable housing. And there we took the sanctuary and the rectory, did a connector in between them and made one larger building that has, I think, 48 units in it of affordable housing for North Kingstown. So we've done many other church conversions too, but so I kind of look at them as really beautiful placeholders within the community and that they're really important visually and spiritually. People have grown up there and looked at the building and seen it for many years. And so if we can keep it and somehow make it work, we'll do it. Now, if we were starting from scratch, would I make affordable housing look like that building? No, because it is pretty tall and there's a lot of volume. So I'll walk you through the plans in a minute, but what we've done is we've inserted a floor inside the church. We're going to add a floor inside because, you know, it's big vaulted spaces, big Gothic spaces. So we're actually putting a floor. If you know the building at all, at the entry part of the building. Well, let me start. I'm jumping ahead. I'm supposed to be looking at the site plan, which is the board over here. So the sanctuary building will stay exactly as it is with no additions, no whatever. Or I can. Okay. Does that show up? Okay. So the church will remain exactly as it is. This is where the rectory sits today. Currently, the rectory is 2 stories and 1 story. So what we're going to do, the way it's constructed right now is it's not really well laid out and easily adaptable to our affordable housing units. So we're going to take it down to the first floor level and rebuild up from there. We're going to keep the foundation because it's all steel framed and everything, concrete walls, steel framing and everything. It's really well built. So basically, we'll just be building up from the first floor and going up. And so we'll be making the rectory building, it'll be the same footprint of what it is today, but it'll be 3 stories instead of 2 and 1. So that's how we get a little extra space and make it work. It also makes it look better. You'll see in a minute when I show you the outside views. And then lastly, we're adding units out right along the street. They're basically replacing a bunch of garage and shed buildings that are at the back of the property. We're going to take those down and basically do our construction up at the street. The reason we're doing that is we think it makes a better streetscape to actually have everything, all the buildings along Broad Street basically line up right on the street and come right up to the street and have their stoops right out on the street. So we're basically trying to keep that rhythm of what Broad Street was before, you know, buildings were taken down and things like that. So we're trying to put back the buildings almost the way they would have maybe been in the past. So we've placed the buildings up along the street. They're not right on the street. There will be, it's hard to see because it's in the shadow, but there'll be little terraces right along the street. So they'll have like a front yard to sit and look out onto the street. And then this is an existing curb cut and will be coming into the property, and all the parking then will be kind of hidden behind the townhouses and back here behind the other buildings. So when you're driving down the street, you really won't see the big parking lots the way you see it today. And then just for reference, this is the existing school over here. There's a little confusion about lots. Right through the middle of the parking lot is a property line. There's actually 2 lots that make up the church property. So we would actually be combining lot 266 and lot 264 into one. Right now, there's a property line that just goes kind of right through the middle of the parking lot. So we would be combining those 2 lots into the one larger lot that all of this would sit on. My boards are back here. In the same spot. Yep. So as I said, the church will remain just as it is. We're not going to do any bump outs or anything. It'll stay the same. Here's the rectory building. We are making a connector between the rectory and the sanctuary. And that's done so that the people that are living in the rectory can go into the church and use the public spaces and the amenities that are in the church, and vice versa. The people in the church will be able to go into the rectory, because we're going to have the whole lower level of the rectory as a common space, the way it used to be the part of the part of the common space for the parish in the lower level. We'll be keeping that and using that room. And then people will be able to go back and forth no matter what the weather, primarily because the elderly probably will be located mostly in the rectory building because it has the elevator. So to have this little connector here so they can go back and forth makes it really work for all seasons, so they don't have to go, like if we're having Meals on Wheels or something in the sanctuary space, the people in here can just walk over without having to get dressed, go outside, whatever. So it's programmatically important to have this little hallway, and it's just a hallway that connects the 2 buildings. So that's really important for us programmatically. And then these are the townhouses that go out along the street. And as I said, what they do is they hide all the parking. So all the parking will be hidden, you won't see it, and hopefully the townhouses along the street will provide a new street edge the way the existing buildings along Broad Street are currently oriented. So this is the sanctuary building, and we do have 1 unit in the lower level and storage. And then rest of the basement, so to speak, is unexcavated. It's just a crawl space. So there's really very little space in the lower level of the sanctuary. So most of all of our units will be on the first floor and the new second floor. The first floor will have units all down like the hallway. Here's the hallway. And we'll still be preserving a community space right in the middle where the altar was. So we'll still have an open room that can have seating. We can have meetings in there. We can have some lectures. We can have some little concerts. We can have some meals for our residents. Here's the altar. It's important. We kept it so the rear wall is still there with the big rose window. So that'll still be a part of the public space. So you'll still be able to see that. So when you walk in the church and look straight down, you'll still have the experience of that large open space, the vaulted ceiling, the stained glass at the end of the hall. At the rear, in the 1 story, which used to be the sacristy, is going to be our kind of offices, our rental office and our management office here in the rear. We'll also be putting a ramp on the back of the building to get up and into the church, because we have stairs right at the front entry, at the steeple, and at the 2 side aisle entrances. big stairs. So we'll be coming in with our ramp at the rear to come into the building. And that'll provide our handicap access. So we basically have 10 units on the first floor, and then we're creating a new second floor, where if you have been in the building and you know, there's an organ loft when you first walk in, like a whole floor right at the front of the building, right here. So we're basically just extending that floor up. So you'll be able to imagine that when you walk in, the organ loft will just be extended down each of the aisles. So the big vaulted spaces that all occur, all in these side aisles, will all still exist. Those will just be part of your unit. Some lucky people will be in there and they'll look up and they'll have Gothic arches inside their apartment. So some lucky people will be able to, we'll take reservations. Some lucky people will be able to have that wonderful experience of the Gothic interior, because we don't want to rip it all out, put in drop ceilings and all of that. So we're basically keeping everything inside and out. So the big vaulted space in the middle here, you'll still have that experience when you walk in, and we're preserving that in this community space in the middle. And then right here, the little hallway connector is what goes over and connects over to the rectory building. So it's very small. We're not putting in any units or anything in that little connector. It's just a hallway so that you can get from the rectory over to the sanctuary building. And we have like public restrooms, we have like laundry facilities and things. So people will be going back and forth and using the property as one property. So this is the rectory building. Here is the lower level, or the basement, if you want to call that. We're going to keep it as our big common room and kitchens and laundries and things all down here. Here's our new elevator that we'll be putting in. Here's the little hallway connector that goes over to the church. So, well, here you can see it here too at the first floor level. So it's just a hallway and a fire stair right there. So the rectory building gets new laid out, 4 units per floor and 3 floors, so that's our 12 units inside the rectory building. And then here are kind of our townhouses, which we have them designed as 3-unit configurations. So there's three units to make up the 9 units. So 2 of them are 2-bedroom townhouses, and then the end one is a 3-bedroom townhouse. So we didn't mention that in the sanctuary, but we have 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and 3-bedrooms inside the sanctuary. So we have a real mix in there. And in the rectory, we have 1s and 2s, and then the townhouses along the street are 2s and 3s. So again, we're back to the view, and here's the sanctuary building, the little connector right here. Here's the rectory building, which you'll see, we're talking about adding height to it because we have gone up, but then we also have this tall roof that we're intentionally putting on because we're putting on steep gables so that they match the pitch and everything of the church. So it looks like it all goes together as one property. And then here's the townhouses in groups of 3, 3, and 3 that are staggered along Broad Street. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So if anybody has any questions that I can answer, or I can come back up later after you've heard other people, if that's.
Can you just go over how many single units?
How many like 1-bedrooms are?
Yeah,
Yeah, if I can
1-bedrooms.
have the site plan again.
You can just give me the total number, you don't have to show.
In your packet, on the site plan sheet, right at the top is our unit count. Can you see that in your packet on your site plan? It just says site plan. Should be like right at, no, like page, just a cover sheet. Next one. Yeah. So the breakout is in the sanctuary. There's 16 one-bedrooms, 3 two-bedrooms, and 2 three-bedrooms. So 21 units inside the sanctuary building. Then the rectory, there's 10 one-bedrooms and 2 two-bedrooms for 12 total in the rectory. And then the townhouses are 7 two-bedrooms and 2 three-bedrooms. So all told, we have the 42 units. Do you need me to repeat those numbers? Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Butler?
I remember several years ago when we toured the Ann and Hope building, they were starting to look at the residential, and they were talking about the importance of windows. So I can see there's lots of windows in the rectory building, the townhouses. I was wondering about the church itself. I know there's lots of stained glass windows. Are those just going to be popped out?
They've already been, they've been removed, except for like the rose window.
Right.
And a couple of other ones. The other ones have been removed. And so we have slots. And the problem is they don't open to work right. So we'll be putting new windows inside those slots. We're not going to make them bigger or wider or anything. We're going to live with. So when you're in the church, you're going to have a small window if you're in one of those units.
Narrow, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But we'll
Windows
have
that
to make
people
them-
can open, or?
Yeah, they'll have to be operable because they have to for fire escape, so that, in the event of a fire. Now, the buildings will be sprinklered and fully alarmed, radio controlled right back to the firehouse and things like that. So they'll be super modern from that standpoint. But still, though, we have to make it so that people can get out. So they will be operable windows, but they'll still stack into like the vertical configuration.
Okay. My other question was around parking. I know Mr. Modica mentioned that the proposed parking is less than what would normally be required. So I was just wondering what the thinking was around parking.
I'll take a stab since I'm standing here.
Okay.
Somebody can poke me. But when we look at our total count, 42, 12 of those are elderly, and we pretty much know that they will not have a car, or maybe only 1 or 2 will have a car. So we're expecting, based upon our previous other projects, that those people will only have maybe 1 or 2 cars for the 12 elderly. So say we have 30, 31 units that are left. So at the 2 spaces per, we're at the 62, 64, we're showing 69 spaces, so that we actually have some for our staff, for some visitors, and realistically 2 per unit.
I think it would, be helpful, maybe as part of the traffic study,
Yeah.
if they could drill into that,
Yep.
as I'm sure you
That's
folks.
what I mean, we'll show some
Yeah.
data from our other properties where we can show you that specifically that the aging in place elderly ones typically don't have a car.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure you folks know it's a very congested area.
Oh, yes.
Getting more congested by the day. And, so my concern would not only, obviously the residents of this, particular, but, the school, the other people that might take up spaces when they're not supposed to. And so, yeah, if that could be kind of addressed in the traffic study when we get to master plan. I think that would be helpful.
Yes.
But I just wanted to say my grandmother was married in this church. She attended for years and years, so it's wonderful to, hopefully to have it saved, and it makes a lot more sense than a Walgreens or a Cumberland Farms, no offense to them, but, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the town, and we obviously need affordable housing, so I applaud you folks for the proposal.
Many of our affordable housing projects only have 10 to 20% affordable. What's unique about this one, that it's 100% affordable? So we were talking earlier about how many units you need to get to where you're getting. This is a big jump because it's 100% affordable, as opposed to just 20%. So if it's 20%, that'd only be 8 units that we would be contributing. But because we're going to do 100% affordable, that really jumps us that 42 notches up on your list.
Mr. Scow?
Which leads me to a question. I mean, because it's a 100% affordable, what is the break-even point for number of units?
Oh, about 42. Yeah, it's kind of, if we could cram on 4 more, we'd probably do that. But it's, we can't, because it's, the more we put on, then the more parking we need, and we're kind of out of land. So basically, we're kind of at the number that we think we need to make a successful project.
What other type of improvements are needed on the outside of the church?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a whole 48-page report that was done on which the church had prepared prior to putting it on the market, which describes all the work that needs to be done. A lot of just masonry, all the joints have to be regrouted. Unfortunately, a lot of them were kind of, some of them were put in with caulk and whatever, and we have to remove that and put in masonry grout in each of the joints, and new copper valleys and flashings, and some work on the steeple. It's basically in good shape, but there is some work that needs to be done on the church.
So my concern is obviously right now in this particular environment, we have escalated costs that are going out of sight. So how have you built that in, and what is your capacity if that creates a problem going forward?
That's where Milton has to open the pocketbook and figure out how to do it.
Thank you for the question, and that's something we struggle with all the time, is how do we make these developments work? So as you might imagine, when you are rent constrained, you can only support so much debt, right? So because you have to have an income to pay the debt. And affordable housing is really developed differently than market rate housing, right? Particularly 100% affordable housing. There are no market units which generate a regular market rate of return that can help support the debt. So a lot of affordable housing is done through very complicated debt capital stacks, very complicated transactions. In this case, we're using 4% low-income housing tax credits. Those tend to bring us about 30 to 35% of the project costs. So the balance is filled with different types of what we call in the affordable housing world as soft debt. They're soft debt because they typically do not require repayment. So they are grants that are disguised in clothing of a loan. And they're done that way for a very specific reason for the tax credit investor. And so we are planning on using 4% tax credits, and then a number of funding sources that we're applying to Rhode Island Housing for, which include the Home Investment Partnership Program, the Housing Trust Fund Program, Building Homes Rhode Island, which is a program that's administered by the Commerce Department, and I believe that's primarily it. It's a whole host of different sources. So our calculations are a little bit different, and so getting back to your question, if we have priced this project based on the current scope of work that's been identified, assuming an escalation that will be in place. Now, we can't predict because no one knew that we would be experiencing the types of construction cost pressures that we're experiencing now. But our contractor has built it in to the best guess that they can make, assuming construction starting at the end of this year. So our pricing, our numbers that we're using to model this development are assuming an escalated price structure by the time we break ground. Additionally, we carry a 10% contingency in our development pro forma as well. 10%, I wish we could carry more, because typically in affordable house, adaptive reuse projects, you always find things that you didn't catch or that need to be addressed. But it is a healthy contingency, and it's more than you would typically carry in a new construction project. So between the pricing with a forward eye towards the end of the year, together with our contingency, we believe we have cost containment, and we believe we can build the project for the numbers that we have identified. Now, if something were to drastically change around that, we would have to consider going back for more funding, provided more funding was available. So that's how we would fill a gap if it were to occur. It doesn't necessarily mean that the project would not be feasible. It would remain feasible as long as we could get additional funding. At some point, the prices of the units become so high that it would not be feasible, because there are caps on, there are absolute total caps on a per unit development cost that our funding sources use. So that I hope that answers your question.
Well, the concern I have, I mean, I'm in favor of affordable housing, don't get me wrong here. It's just, from my financial background, I'm just concerned that with rising rates going forward right now, inflation, a 10% contingency may not be enough.
Right.
And that's been a problem in the past, in my experience. And I'm just concerned that the project stall somewhere along the line. And that would not be a good thing, obviously, for you or for us.
Yeah, so I can address that real quick. So first off, every project that's being built right now is facing the same pricing pressure that we will, right? And again, as I mentioned, 10% is the contingency we have, but the real protection we have built into this is the forward pricing that has been done by our general contractor. So within that number, I couldn't tell you what percentage breakdown is, but there's an estimate that prices are going to rise between now and the time we can break ground sometime at the end of the year. So the idea is that's already baked in. So our 10% contingency might come to more to a 20 or 25% contingency. I don't know the exact number. So that would be the first part. The second part as it relates to the project. Once the project's underway, there are a series of performance and completion guarantees that are executed by us as the developer, and we ultimately have to complete the project, right? So, which means that we look to our balance sheet and to the balance sheet of any of our partners to be able to increase the equity that's contributed to the project to complete it. So our tax credit investor is invested in the project. We're invested in the project. We have a very healthy, for nonprofit community development corporation, we have a very healthy balance sheet. And so any project shortfalls that occur during the course of the project, we still have the obligation to complete the project and deliver the project as a turnkey project to be used for affordable housing.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Costa, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. I know lot 267 does not belong to the project, because that is adjacent to the school, and I'm looking here. But it is adjacent, obviously, to lot 266. Will there be any way of cars going into lot 266 from 267? And my other question is, I would like a traffic study to look at the time frame between 2:15 and roughly 2:40 in the afternoon.
Yeah, so
It's interesting.
Yeah, I'll respond to the first question first. We are still working on the site circulation plan. So we are engaged our civil engineers, Commonwealth, Mr. Bean's here this evening. He's not prepared to make a presentation because we haven't finalized our plan. But part of the plan does consider how traffic is going to circulate. We are considering using the ability to use that lot, that adjoining lot, as part of our circulation plan for emergency vehicles. That's something we have to negotiate with the current owner of that property. As was mentioned earlier, there's a discussion regarding sharing some parking with the school next door. We don't have a contractual obligation to share parking with them. However, they've expressed an interest in it, and to the extent that we have the capacity to do so, we are going to entertain sharing some parking for them to have non-exclusive uses of certain a number of parking spaces within our lot during school hours. Now, that is sort of what we're thinking in terms of being able to help each other out, provide them the opportunity to use some parking. We can use part of their lot for circulation. That remains to be seen, though, because we haven't finalized the site plan. And by the time we come back to master plan, we might have a whole different configuration, but as of right now, that's what the consideration is.
I can see emergency, but
Yeah,
it's worth the trip over there.
I agree, and I've been over there, I've spent quite a bit of time over there, and to the second part of your question, the traffic study will be conducted in consideration of the whole traffic scenario during all hours of the day, and it will take specific notice to high traffic times, right? Because that's the most important consideration. They do things like total traffic count, accident data analysis. They also look at a number of trips per day based on the demographics of not so much the people, but the types of units. So based on the number of bedrooms and number of units, how many average daily trips there are, how long the trips typically are. So there's a whole bunch of data that's been assimilated by professional groups. All that data helps inform them. And then, of course, they visit the site and they make their own observations.
Drop off and pickup of the ES1 is very important
Sure.
to you
But no,
and
understood.
to us.
Understood, and I think, not that I think, I know we have made that perfectly clear to our traffic study. So the traffic study is being performed by Crossman Engineering, and they have already completed their traffic counts. They have requested the traffic accident information from the Cumberland Police Department, and they are assimilating all the data that I mentioned and planning more site visits at various times to make those analyses. So we don't have the traffic study yet, but we will have it for master plan, obviously.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
I have maybe a comment
Yes, Ms. Reese?
rather than a question. I've lived in this area for 53 years, so I'm very familiar with the church, the area, and when I looked at this project, I thought, it's great, at least we're going to use the church for something else. However, the townhouses, in my mind, don't belong there. I know you want to make Broad Street looking the same, but it's not the area for those. That's just my point of view. I think that this is congested. The parking lot is definitely an issue. If you're going to share with the school, you're already saying that older people don't drive. I beg your pardon. Older people do drive.
Yeah, no, and yes, no, of course. And I'd like to clarify that. So the reason why we are suggesting that the older folks in this project will not necessarily have vehicles is because we are looking at nursing home diversion patients. So these are going to be folks who might otherwise live in a nursing home, who don't quite need that level of care, but who are living on their own independently. So that's why we don't believe a lot of these folks will have vehicles. Now, we may be wrong about that, but even if we are wrong about that, we still think that a number of spaces that are provided based on the existing data that we have from our own experience and from published data from traffic engineers.
But you're talking about a project from Westerly that was mentioned somewhere in there?
We're talking about,
We're talking about a different area.
no, of course, right. And one of the things I want to.
Population is just, the traffic is unbelievable.
Understood.
So you're gonna have to really sell this out, especially to me, because I'm not buying it right now the way it is.
Right, and I appreciate that. And what I will say is that as part of our preparation for this and developing this plan, we did hold a community outreach meeting that was held in this very room just last week. And we had about 20 members of the community come, and I think just about everybody expressed a concern around parking and traffic. And what I'll share is this. Nothing we do on that site, there's not one thing we can do on that site that will fix any of the problems on Broad Street, that will fix the traffic. There's nothing we can do to fix it. But what we can do, I'm sorry? So what we can,
Excuse me, you'll get your chance, okay? everyone here will be given a chance, but we don't want to have, okay?
So as I was saying, we can't fix it, right? But it is our job to make sure that we don't make it worse. And that's what our plan is. Our plan with the parking and our plan with the circulation is designed so that we don't make it any worse. And we are confident that in our presentation at master plan approval, we'll be able to present a plan to you that accomplishes that. Now, not everyone may agree, or everyone might not believe it, but our experts will be able to identify a plan that will not make it worse. We're not going to fix what's out there, but we certainly won't make it worse.
So in your statement, you just said that this will be elderly population or people that are in nursing homes but need to go, that can probably do well by themselves in a setting. So it's almost like an assisted living.
Right, so
By-
right, and so there are very specific medical definitions about
Yeah.
congregate nursing care, assisted living, and then aging in place, right? And I'm not a physician, and
But I'm a
no-
nurse, so you are talking
Well,
to someone.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate your experience, and we want to draw on your experience to make our project better. What I will share with you is that the population that are being considered for these 12 units are individuals who have a level of need for some care, who aren't advanced to the point that they require 24-hour assisted living care or require nursing home care. So it may be that they have one or two functions. I think there's what they call, again, I'm going to step into an area that I'm not familiar with, but there's an assessment tool that's done about daily living tasks, and they will fall within one of those categories of daily living tasks. And there will be services that will be offered to them through a program that we'll be offering. And that will give them the opportunity to avoid nursing home care. This is sort of a pilot program that we're thinking about to try to reduce Medicaid costs, because oftentimes people end up in assisted living care, which is reimbursed by Medicaid, or nursing home care, when they don't need that level of services. They're just shy of perhaps being able to live on their own without services. So that's the intent there.
Okay, thank you for your explanation, but with that comment, please think about the emergency rescue people coming into the area.
Right.
Because now you're adding another category into the mix.
Sure, and to that point, we did have a meeting, a technical review committee meeting with all of the various town officials, as you might be aware. It's part of our process. And the public safety folks were on the call with us, on the meeting with us, and they expressed those concerns. And so certainly our buildings are going to be designed so that they can be accessible to emergency workers, be able to, move people in and out as they might need to with gurneys and stretchers and such. And then the parking lot will be designed so that they'll be accessible as well. So that's all part of the consideration. And we did take some input from the folks, the technical review committee, on how to make that design better. And what you see is part of that process. It's been evolving. This plan that you see before you was different than it was first conceived, and it's going to be different when it gets to master plan because it's getting better.
Mr. D'Ambrosio?
My background is as a landscape architect, so I deal with site planning, and I'm familiar with developments and all that. So I'm looking at the site plan, and there's a couple of points I just want to bring up. The first one being that the parking, I know that there's a feeling that there's some flex space in there. It looks like it's fairly developed as much as it can possibly be as far as cramming in as many parking spaces as possible. So I'll be interested to see how that continues to progress as the project goes along, and whether you can maintain that number or not. I do appreciate, however, the idea that you have this row of townhouses, and it's different than your opinion, and respectfully. It's important to maintain a streetscape. It's important to maintain a certain feel of a neighborhood and not making something drastically different. And I think, for years we've been seeing this large open parking lot space. It's an eyesore. Framing that with townhouses, I think it's an idea. I would be interested to see how the development of the design of those go. I know it's oftentimes that, townhouses are very repetitive looking. The renderings that we're seeing, each face of the building is exactly the same as you're going down. They all are right now tan and beige. So, I know that it's low-income housing, and sometimes that there are limits to funding and what you can do architecturally, but I think it would be a worthy consideration to look at different materials and colors and layouts so that it's not a static, repetitive pattern as you're traveling from this nice architecture on the corner. So,
Yeah, I'll just respond briefly, and maybe Michael can comment too, but there are some really great architectural materials that are being used in affordable housing, in fact, any housing. It's the same material that we're using on affordable housing as we are on any other housing. Lots of different colors, lots of different textures, and I'm sure that the design that Michael ends up coming up with will be very attractive, and it will not be as linear as you might be imagining. We're very sensitive to that. Part of our design review process with Rhode Island Housing is they look at these things like that as well, right? And so they oftentimes offer a lot of feedback on how they've seen other things done in the past in order to sort of mitigate the sterileness of the front of a building face, right? And so we certainly will be, one of the things we're most proud of at One Neighborhood Builders is the way our projects turn out, right? So we have a number of projects. Most of them are scattered site developments that are located in and around Greater Providence, but they're beautiful buildings, and you can drive through the neighborhood and know exactly which ones are ours. When I first started at One Neighborhood Builders, that's exactly what I did. I drove around, I'm like, oh, that must be one of ours, and I looked at the sheet. So we have 488 units. I wanted to mention that. I didn't get a chance in my introduction. We have 488 units under management and 14 different projects, and we manage all of them. So when I say we manage it, we have a third-party management company, but we oversee them. We own every piece of property that we've built, with the exception of home ownership properties. We haven't sold any of them, and that's not part of our mission. So we will be present, overseeing the property management, and we have a very nice product. Michael, do you want to comment on that?
Mr. Brogan, another question?
Yeah, I just have one more question. This is more about your operations. My experience has been with some privately controlled low-income housing developments that there are certain regulations and rules that maintain order, and any concerns about crime and stuff like that generally comes with low-income housing. So I wanted to know if that is something that you guys have as part of your ownership. Do you maintain regulations as far as crime and stuff like that?
Right. So to be clear, I don't think there's any data that says just because a project is low-income housing, it's subject to more crime.
No, and I'm not implying
Right.
that. I'm just saying that's a stigma that.
No, I
generally
understand.
occurs.
Yeah, and that's a fair question, right? Because we get that all the time. And I think the answer is this. We have, so first off, when you think about the income levels of the folks that are living there, it's not the stigma of the income of folks that automatically come to mind. These are folks that are working people who work in your community. They're probably people who already live here are going to move into those units, right? And so it's not like there's going to be a whole host of folks that aren't from the community that are going to show up here one day and start marauding around Broad Street. In order to ensure the safety of our operations, we have a number of things in place. The first part is we have a tenant selection plan. The tenant selection plan very specifically identifies the process in certifying a tenant as low income and then also screening them. So we do criminal background checks and we do credit checks and that sort of thing. In addition to that, we have rules and regulations for our apartments that have to be followed. And we have a professional management company. So between the screening that happens up front, the rules and regulations that are in our leases, and the property managers who are on site and reviewing what goes on a day-to-day basis on a property, those three things help to mitigate the potential for an issue that might arise. We can't say that nothing's ever not bad going to happen there. It happens in high rises, and crime happens in all places, unfortunately. But what we can say is that if criminal activity is occurring and we have some way to control that, whether it's evicting a tenant who's engaging in a nuisance of some sort, or if it's screening them so they don't become a tenant in the first place, we certainly do that. And we take, because as I just mentioned, being an owner operator who is local, we are here on the ground, right? And so we get involved, and we're not like just set it and forget it. We're going to be monitoring what happens in our properties like we do every property. And I think that those elements help address the concerns that you have.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And I think Michael might be able to address your question about the materials and.
I'm just going to say that at the moment, they're kind of just placeholders. We haven't fully developed them out, and we're trying to make them look different, so that they don't appear all repetitive. So the next step, the next iteration, you'll see they'll look different. This is a placeholder at the moment. Yeah.
Right, I just want to make sure that
That's
where
where
we're
that's
headed.
a valid criticism. So we'll take that to heart.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I have two. One is, you made mention of emergency service people that you've talked with. Okay, so the question is, are you going to have any on-site, or is there a need for any on-site medical personnel like RNs or anything?
We're not anticipating that there'll be any on-site services.
Okay.
The services will be provided to the tenants that are aging in place, will be as like supportive services in connection with their tenancy there. So there won't be any medical personnel on site.
Okay, and the other thing is, what will the age distribution be? From what age to what age is what you're anticipating will be people living there?
It's hard to say because we don't have an age is not a factor that we screen out for, right?
Okay.
So anyone who is legal age to sign a lease could be a tenant. And we certainly can't discriminate against someone who is either too young or too old, right? I would say that in all of our developments, our demographics in terms of age tend to match very closely with the demographics of the community. So we're not seeing a particular group of younger people or older people. It tends to be a mix that matches with the demographics of the community.
Okay. Well, what I was thinking of is, in terms of the traffic, and obviously there was a mention, I think Mr. Abbott had mentioned about older people, okay, including myself. And I've reached that point, that tend to either have one vehicle or they don't travel an awful lot, maybe just locally, okay? But then again, it seems as though that you could have a 20-something in there that would be going, or a 30 or 40-something that would live there, that would be probably more active in coming and going. I'm just trying to think of it traffic-wise.
Exactly right, and I think that's part of what the traffic study analyzes, based on the configuration of units that exist, what is the typical demographics of the tenant, and then what are their typical travel patterns. And I think that that's what we'll be able to glean from the traffic study. And part of what we'll do too is for supportive services include stuff like transportation to doctors and grocery shopping and that type of thing. So they won't, the tenants who are aging in place won't necessarily be on an isolated island on their own. They'll have these services, so they won't have a need for a car because they'll have either meal services being brought in or medical services, physical therapy or occupational therapy that's occurring within the home, and then transportation to doctors and transportation to grocery, church, that type of thing.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Just one more question. What is the projected cost of the entire project?
When you started asking numbers, I thought you might bring that up. And I have to tell you, I don't have my materials with me. I don't remember. I'm in the process of completing 5 applications to Rhode Island Housing, so I'm having a lot of deal merge. So I don't want to be incorrect, but if that's something that is appropriate to share, we'll certainly be happy to share it.
I think it would be appropriate, and also to look at your balance sheet would be important to me as well. So.
Mr. Costa?
I just want to make sure I understand. The condos and the apartments, the condos, are they sold to these people?
Nope,
It's like a rent,
it's 100% rental.
100%.
That's correct. That's correct.
Anyone else, any other questions? Mr. McGonigal, anything else? I can do that. What I will do is, when I open, if you would prefer that, I can do that. Sure. Okay, sure. So I'm going to open this up to the floor, but what I would like to do first is to ask the Conservation Commission people who are here, if they have any questions. I'd like to hear from you first, and then we'll open up the rest of the floor to the rest of the people in attendance. Nothing? I know we have another member down there. You all set? Okay, thank you. Mr. Modico, is there anyone in the queue?
We have, there's 2 people attendees on Zoom right now.
Okay, so I'll open up the floor to everyone else on the, in attendance here, and also to the people who are watching this virtually. If you have any questions, comments, please come to the podium and give us your name and your address for the record, please.
Good evening. I am Barbara Paquette. I always have to do that. Story of my life. I am Barbara Paquette. I live at, I own a 3-family on Elizabeth Street, number 628. I have lived there for 38 years, and I've been a resident of the Valley for 63 years. So I'm very familiar with this area, and I thank you for taking notice of the problems that we have with traffic. So let me just get right to this. First of all, Mr. Abbott and Mr. Baxter did a fabulous job. I love the colors. I love everything about it. Absolutely. And I love that we're reaching out and doing affordable housing. I think that's a very important part of who we are as a community. That being said, I'd like to address the problem, and it's not the elephant in the room anymore. It's the traffic issue. Now, I know we can wax poetic about every expert that will come up and stand here, but you know who the real expert is? Me and anyone else that lives in this neighborhood. We are the experts. This week, after we went to the first meeting, I made it my business to, first of all, visit every elderly housing. And I looked at their parking lots, and guess what I found? They were full. They were full. So to say that they are not driving, I think is a misconception. That being said, secondly, to say that a one bedroom would only have one vehicle is absurd. I have rented my apartments for 38 years. I have never once had a couple who only had one vehicle. So even if we went that the 16 one bedrooms had 2 vehicles and the other 10 only had 1, you're still at 20, you're still at 32 vehicles. That doesn't leave much room. Where are they going? You have 69 spots for 42 units. How many spots are for visitors? Yes. 5 spots for visitors, so now we're down to 37. We're down to, we're down to 57 spots. I think any one of us here can see that the traffic issue is a huge issue. Again, this morning I timed how long it took me to get out of my street at Elizabeth Street. You know how many turns of the light? 4. 4 turns of the light to get out of my street. And that's on a good day. Secondly, the parking is absolutely ridiculous. Cumberland PD, I happened to drive by the high school, and there was a Central Falls police officer there. I'm like, what is CF doing here? So I stopped, I said, what are you guys doing here? He's like, oh, you're gonna have to call the department. So I did. And you know what they said? Oh, we were asked to help, to aid with traffic in the area. Now you're calling, so we're overburdening not only our own police department, but now we're calling in Central Falls. I think my biggest issue is when those 69 spots are filled, and they are going to be, and we're gonna have an overflow, these extra cars will be parked on Elizabeth and Geldart Street, which is already overburdened. If you live there, as I do, we park on the street. What is going to happen when now you've got people coming over from the sanctuary, they're parking in spots that are for residents there? I just feel it's going to cause some very hard feelings that shouldn't happen, because we do need, I mean, I'm happy that they're gonna do this with the church, but I think you also need, as much as we want those residents to have a place, we also need to protect the residents who have lived there. And that's what I'm asking you to do, to look at the traffic study. The experts can wax poetic about everything, but if you don't live here, you don't know. And so that's what I'm asking.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jesus, but we can't get it.
Yes, is there anyone else? Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes, Chairman, members of the board, I echo this young lady's sentiments, in reference to the parking. The residents who have, lived in this area need that parking. So I would ask your consideration on this, to take a look at this traffic study and really, do your best to resolve this situation, I know there's been a lot of changes made in Cumberland, but right now we're being clobbered, So with that said, I'd appreciate your consideration. Thank you. State Representative Jim McLaughlin, that's my district. Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else? This is a great opportunity, because this is just a first glance at this right now. And moving forward, they're gonna get into we'll call it the nitty gritty, the actual engineering that's involved and so on. So it's not just for the benefit of the members of the board, it's also for the benefit of the applicant. They need to hear your input also, moving forward. So please, don't be afraid to come up and voice your concerns. Certainly.
Hi, I'm Susan Evers, and I reside at 60 Hattie Ave, Cumberland. And the question is, you mentioned that this was a pilot for the 12 elderly housing units. So what goes into the pilot, and what if it doesn't work? And because what's coming up for me, hearing everybody talking about traffic and knowing that this is a really congested area, if it doesn't work and those are turned into standard rentals, you have an additional 12 or 20, potentially 24 people that are looking to park their cars. So I want to understand more about the pilot.
Certainly.
The concept of this aging in place pilot, which is a term I threw out there kind of a little maybe loosely, came to us from the Office of Health and Human Services, and they were offering the ability to have some subsidy and some funding to help us either build the project or to subsidize its operations. Come to find out, as we like to say in Rhode Island, those funds could not be used for that purpose. So we are no longer taking a subsidy from the Office of Health and Human Services. But in the process, we became really attuned to the fact that this was a need And so while I say it's a pilot, it is a commitment that we as One Neighborhood Builders are making to dedicate those 12 units for aging in place elderly folks. There's no formal government pilot, there's no subsidy associated with those units at this time. There may be at some point if Medicaid finds a way that they can use funds to assist with capital projects or with subsidy, then perhaps there might be the opportunity for us to have an operating subsidy. But as it stands right now, we're not receiving any funding from any source for this. This is a commitment that we're making. We're trying to understand how, there's a lot of constituents within affordable housing, the affordable housing demographic, right? You have very young, you have families, and you have people who are elderly and who maybe need assistance. We're trying to create an environment that is comfortable for them and offers them some services. And we're going to do that through what we call our resident services coordinator, which is a on-staff person that we fund for all of our developments. They'll be helping coordinate with services. And then we're still searching for the best way to execute on this. But it's our commitment to keep these 12 units as affordable for aging in place folks. Sure.
Is there anyone else has a question? Sure.
Will Cumberland residents get preference for the
Good question.
As I mentioned earlier when we were talking about demographics, we find that the folks that tend to end up in a development tend to be people from the community. That being said, I don't know that we can create a bright line rule that says only Cumberland folks will live here. But we're certainly going to promote the project within Cumberland because it's going to be being built. We'll have signs and leasing opportunities. And we think that it's our thought that the folks that are going to live there are people that are currently in this community.
Well, since you mentioned you have a screening process, I'm sure when the applications come in, you can look at them and certainly say, well, gee, these are from Cumberland, so you would give them consideration.
Right.
What's
So
that? No, so then what's the screening process for? More for,
Ken, you got to use the microphone.
We don't want to go down that path at all because of federal fair housing laws.
yeah,
But there is effective, legitimate ways to get the word out early.
okay.
And if there's a list and they applied, yeah, and we're gonna be all over the local television for the next few months, so they're gonna, yeah, and we can do that, right? But we don't want to talk about that again, if you don't mind.
Well, I think it's a valid question because it puts everything to bed, makes it very clear.
right, and I think the short answer is that we follow all regulations as it relates to fair housing. So that's why I can't say there's a bright line rule around screening somebody just from Cumberland. There is a process that we have to follow. But it is our experience that when we build a project in East Providence, it's typically people who live in East Providence who are living there, who come from within the community. It's not an influx of people from outside of the community. There is enough need within the community of Cumberland, as is demonstrated by the percentage of affordable housing stock, that there will be a germane number of folks from the community who would be interested in living there. And we anticipate that they will apply, and that, based on our experience, it'll be a predominant Cumberland residents. But again, as I indicated, we can't differentiate on that ground.
Mr. Costa?
Just curious, so the 480 units that you have, has your screening process ever failed you?
Well, I haven't been with the organization long enough to have organizational history. I'm sure that there are examples where the tenants have caused problems, but I would say to you that that's the case in whether you're in Water Place Park in Providence or you're in a manor someplace, one of these manor projects. You can never control with absolute certainty the conduct of tenants, right? You look at probabilities, and that's what screening does, right? So the screening allows us to look at people's history that they have themselves, and if they have violent, so there's a criminal exclusion for people who engage in violence and drug crimes and that type of thing. And if that's evident, then those are folks that we typically do not house in our developments. And so, I don't know, I can't directly answer your question, but I can say that no housing screening process could ever eliminate the possibility of a criminal act or some unsavory behavior occurring at a particular project.
Just curious. Thank you.
Mr. Ambrosi?
As you've heard already, parking and traffic is a major concern, especially in this part of town. There have been other projects that have come before us that have talked about the idea of having parking permits for the users of the space. Are there regulations or permits that allow only 1 or 2 cars per unit, or
Yeah.
how is that regulated?
Yeah, so in our lease agreements, we can control how many vehicles you can have, and so we will do that. And then, we haven't decided whether we're going to assign spots specifically to each tenant on site. One of the ways that we do accomplish that is by resident stickers. So our management company, and if it would become an issue where we felt that it was necessary to patrol the parking lot frequently, our management folks would show up and go through the parking lot, and if there's cars there that did not contain a resident sticker and they weren't registered as a visitor, then we would have the right to tow them. My experience is that when you start enforcing that, you get compliance pretty quick. We don't allow old abandoned unregistered vehicles to remain on the property. We're very strict, to the chagrin of some of our tenants, on how we police parking. And again, those are in scattered site developments where you don't have as many units consolidated. So the parking is a real premium there, and so we have to police that. So we have experience in doing that, and our property management company does as well. So we expect the same to be the case here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scan?
There's one underlying condition here that creates a major problem regarding traffic, and it's something that's built up over the last year or two. There's been a lot of construction on Broad Street, and I'm not sure if it's being resurfaced this year or not. Okay, well, I don't know the exact dates, obviously, but I think that adds to the issue, and I think the traffic study needs to take that into consideration, the time frame that occurs and how it impacts the neighborhood, especially this young lady who lives right next door. I mean, it is a problem. I ride up and down Broad Street a lot, and the traffic conditions are exacerbated by the construction. So it's important that I think this traffic study takes that into consideration as well.
I know that the DOT can be accused of being slow, but I would say that we're not planning on having any tenants living on site for probably 18 months. And from what I understand, the DOT's plan on resurfacing Broad Street is this paving season. We're aware of that because of moratoriums around utility cuts, and so we're paying attention to that.
Okay.
So I think that work will be long completed by the time our first tenants move in.
Thank you.
I know there's some folks on Zoom, I think, right?
First of all, I'm going to ask one more time, is there anyone in the audience that has a question? The one thing I want to make you aware of, if you think your question is foolish, it's not foolish, and don't think it that way. If it's a stupid question, it's not a stupid question, okay? Please come forward, give us your name and address for the record.
Ted Vecchio, 584 Bound Road, Woonsocket. My family owns Ralco Equipment down on Ralco Way. I think that something that changes the proposal is that the town asked, the town made contact with these folks to try to save the church, which is a very noble effort. And as they mentioned, as everyone has mentioned, we need affordable housing. But the comprehensive, the comprehensive permit is something that was new information to me today. And that's kind of scary because you know, you have elected officials that are required to do a job, and bypassing all of that, you know, obviously we have zoning rules for a reason, and the 2-to-1 for parking is something that is important, especially down on this side of you know, of town. It's very built up, and you know, I've avoided we used to go to Pizza Man for lunch every day. Every day we used to go to Pizza Man. We go to Ani's now because we can't get up and down Broad Street. It's needs to, I think it needs to be done. I think it's a great project. I've seen other projects in Mass where they've done church conversions, but I really think that the number has to come down of units to make sure that that parking situation is, you know, doable. Uh, At the community meeting, I think there were some residents from Berkeley Commons that came down, and they had said that they had a similar structure in lots, parking spots per unit, and it just doesn't work. Doesn't work. I think the fact that it's affordable housing, you know, you're banking on the fact that people need you know, can you only use 50% of their income, and maybe they can't afford 2 cars. But when we need a car, we find a car. You know, that's what we do. You know, you need a car. So, you know, it's just, I think it's a great idea. I think the town reaching out to them speaks volumes because we don't want something else to go in there. But I just think you have to cap the units or raise the parking somehow.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yeah, yes.
Hi, I just have one quick comment. Lindsay Corsi, 35 Payne Road. I know this is preliminary, and we're concerned about trying to fit as many units and as many parking spaces as we can on a lot that has constraints, but I just want to make a note of, I just hope that the vegetation and creating a softer environment that's pleasant from the streetscape and for the residents who live in this on this property doesn't get lost in the mix while we're trying to push for other priorities. I mean, I know that concern over the appearance of the townhouses from the street front was a concern, so I would offer like vegetation as a way to soften that and make it prettier for everyone driving by, but also more pleasant for people who live there. Again, I mean, I know this is low-income housing, but that doesn't mean that we can't make it look nice. And I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost along the way. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you this much. This board is very lucky, fortunate, that we have a landscape architect right there. It's a member, and he looks out for us when it comes to things, landscape, environmental. So we're gonna expect Mr. D'Ambrosio to really get his hands in this one. Is there anyone else? Okay, Mr. Modica, anyone in the queue?
We have Anthony has his hand raised. So Anthony, I'm going to promote you to panelist, and if you just give us your name and address. And you need to unmute yourself, Anthony. I think you're on. There's a little microphone in the lower, yep.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Sorry. All right. Hi, my name's Anthony. I live in 7 John Street. I live literally right across the street from this garage. I need to know more or less several issues. This is the first time, honestly, we heard about anything in terms of a meeting with this project. The only way I find that out is through the Cumberland Facebook community page. I don't know if there's going to be any flyers for any future community meetings. We literally live right across the street, right on John Street. Every day we get cars going down the wrong way. And this was even before they're talking about anything. They really need to put in consideration the traffic study. I fight even with my own neighbors here across the street daily for parking. I mean, it's to the point where, you know, we just move cars as soon as we find a spot, we go in there. And also, I don't know if the developer can answer any questions in terms of anytime there's any type of construction, it's going to disturb things and there's going to be a rodent problem. We've seen it before in Providence. I've seen it in Cranston. Is there any assurances on their half on which they're going to mitigate or deter, any rats or anything coming on my property? Because I'm right across the street from this thing. So I don't know, like, what are they going to do in terms of ensuring that, at least at minimum of rodents? I don't want rats in my house. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Modica, anyone else?
We have one other attendee. If you'd like to speak, there's a raise your hand icon at the bottom of your screen, so you can just hit that. So, no, Mr. Chair, that's all we have.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. McGonagall. Harry Potter, my gosh. It's Gunnagle, not Gonagle.
It's McGonagall, and one of the things I was gonna say, if it was going well, and it's going well enough to say, I very much enjoy working on affordable housing projects. It's pretty much the highlight of my legal career. Mr. Butler said something earlier that has given me permission to say that when my McGonagalls came from Ireland, they moved to the Falls, and they joined that church. And they were druggists when they came over from Ireland, and the McGonagall's drug was on Dexter Street. So although I'm a lifelong Cranston resident, this project does mean a little something to me other than being the lawyer. I'm very psyched that it's gonna save that building. And I can only imagine what other people think who live here. So a couple of just housekeeping things that I wanted to know. Well, not wanted to know, I wanted to share. So we are psyched that you are a landscape architect, and we really will do that stuff in our months working with you all. One of the things that we'll do for our original plan was to try to be here for May 25th for a master plan. That's gonna be our goal, but it'll probably be after that. It'll probably be the next month, in all honesty, because we have a lot of materials that we have to give you. And we're gonna prepare each one of you a binder, sort of like this, with a lot of stuff in it, a bunch of which you will pay close attention to. Based on what I've heard tonight, I know you're gonna. And there's some things we have to put in by law that you probably won't care about very much. Like, I have to draft a deed restriction that goes in the land records. It says for 30 years, it'll be low to moderate income housing. You probably won't read that. But there's a pro forma. Mr. Scound's questions about finances will be addressed in the pro forma in that binder. So we'll get them to you. What likely will happen is that we're gonna get the stuff to Glenn a little earlier, get some final comments from him. We adjust what we can and then print for you guys. And you hopefully will have that in advance of any kind of master plan. It was just a couple other things. I wanted to say Milton hit home about the 100% affordable, and of course Glenn talked about it too, but I actually would go a little bit further and say, I can't do this very well in math, maybe finance people will, but not only is it important that we're 100, because okay, it's 42 units towards Cumberland's goal, but we're not adding anything to Cumberland's housing stock that isn't. If we're not saying that we're gonna add 40 units and that you follow me? You're all shaking my head good, because I'm not a math person, but it's a true number that helps, that gets that 10% very, I think, well. Last year, I just want to tell you one last story, because it's beautiful. There's no guarantee, but someone else brought up, one of our last neighbors brought up work on churches in Massachusetts. So I went to law school at BU and lived in the Brookline area. I ran a dormitory for BU, and my neighborhood church, it was Roman Catholic church, was St. Aidan's, where JFK went when he was a little kid. So last year I went to a reunion at BU, and I went over to go see the church. It's not a church anymore, despite JFK and his family growing up there. It's affordable housing. It's absolutely beautiful. These are nice projects, and we hope you will allow us to help save it. That was it, I think. We very much appreciate you being here tonight on a special night. It shows us a lot, and we'll try to show you a lot. We've heard it all. I've got a whole bunch of notes for the traffic expert. Our engineer, Tim, who was sitting behind me, is also working on the parking issues along with the traffic expert. They both do that. And we'll have a lot of material for you to look at. And we'll try to make it germane to the questions, not just numbers. So.
Mr. Bogano, will the community be able to view the traffic study?
I'm not exactly sure. Let's ask Glenn that.
There you go. So everything, it will be posted, they're usually posted the Friday before the planning board meeting. That gets posted on ClerkBase, which, are you familiar with? So in the planning board folder, we post all the materials there. Yeah, or you can just call the planning department and we can give you a copy. And anyone can do that.
One question, could they also have an exit onto Church Street to make Broad Street not as for an emergency? I mean, they're only having one exit.
That's
Which is right across the street from my street.
right.
So if they can't get across where they're gonna go, they're gonna come down my street.
Right. That's not that's a question for a civil engineer, I would think.
Oh, come on, this is gonna stop.
So we're gonna put an ad in the newspaper, and we're gonna notify by mail all abutters within 200 feet. And anyone can just contact the planning department if you want to be notified, and we can put you on a list for email notifications.
That's a good point. It's 14 days notice, as we discussed today. So there'll be 14-day notice to 200-foot abutters. Do we have to notify Massachusetts residents? No.
No,
Okay,
we're not there. No.
thank you. Mr. Chair?
Relative to your numbers comment, I argued years ago with comprehensive permits and so on and affordable housing, okay? An applicant would come in, and you want to make it very simple. If you've got 10 units, and you're looking for 10% affordable, and you're only putting 1 in out of 10, and just keep going. So how many units, if you had 100 units, how many units out of the 100 are affordable? It gets worse and worse and worse, the larger the development becomes.
Right.
You'll never reach that 10%.
Correct.
Never, I argued that years ago. You'll never, ever, ever reach that 10%. Something like when you're proposing 100% affordable, gets us a little bit closer. You know, it may only get us a couple of percentage points closer, but usually that 10% situation of, you know, affordable to the development, it's like it keeps putting its back in the hole deeper and deeper. So I understand what your comment was about those numbers.
Thank you.
And actually how important it is that if you can get 100%, no, I don't care if it's 10 units, okay? And all 10 of them are affordable units. We're moving in the right direction.
Right.
So that's my comment. Mr. Costa, you had a comment.
Yes, excuse me. I'm assuming that this project will probably take a couple years to develop, at least? Okay. During this traffic study, I'd like to know where all the workers are gonna park their cars. How are the construction trucks going to exit and come into this development? That's gonna add to what's going on down there now. So in every construction worker comes in with a vehicle.
True, but no one will be living there.
Yeah. So.
No, well, I mean, on site, we won't have any residents during that
Is
time.
there anybody here would like to rent their?
I certainly asked the parking people to
If you have 50
take that into
if you have
consideration.
50 workers at a construction site, they're gonna have probably 50 vehicles. Where are they gonna go?
In the 69 spaces.
On
that we-
Elizabeth Street?
No.
Oh. And all these big trucks coming in and out, I mean, taking gravel in and whatever.
It's a dilemma, I think, that.
I know it's only a short period of time, but still, it's gonna be a huge inconvenience to these people.
Yeah, it's a dilemma that's inherent of any construction project.
This is
where
Valley
do-
Falls.
Where do the, you know, where
This
do
is
the
different.
personnel park their cars. And when you've got a situation like it is down here, it's almost, impossible for them to be able to park unless they're gonna park on the street, and that's not gonna be doable, so I think it's a point well taken.
I'll start, we'll try to address that for next time we're here.
I mean, I apologize for putting this into this whole quagmire, but, you know, this is such a sensitive issue down here, so sensitive. And, you know, your heart goes out to these people. I mean, I have a place to park where I live, but in this case here, it's very, very different. Very different.
We hear that.
But thank
Any
you.
other comments from the board? Mr. Modica?
I have no comments.
Okay. So I believe that concludes the business of this evening. The one thing, Mr. Modica, I think we need to make clear for everyone here as we move forward and we advertise that the butters are going to be notified.
Oh, absolutely. They'll be notified by mail. And you can come and see me. I brought my card, and you can just get in touch with me, and we can let you know when the master plan meeting is going to be occurring.
And that's butters within,
Abutters within 200 feet will be notified at least 14 days before the meeting.
Find a friend who is.
Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Rashid, second by Ms. Reese. All in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone.